Hello and welcome to the I Hate Drums podcast with me, Mark, your teacher for this series. Today we're going to continue working on our shuffle grooves and also learn how this can be presented in 4/4 instead of 12/8. Now when you're playing a ballad, which we looked at in a previous lesson, you're actually hitting the hi-hat or the ride cymbal on all of those triplet counts, and that's why this is presented in 12/8. Because 12/8 reflects all of those triplet counts. But when you're playing a shuffle groove, you're not actually hitting the hi-hat on all of those triplet counts. You're missing out that middle triplet. And this means there is another way of presenting it, in 4/4. Now on page 81 of my book, Intermediate 1, which you can find on my website www.ihatedrums.co.uk, the top of the page, you can see what a shuffle pattern would look like if it was written in standard 4/4. There'd be threes all over the place, and this is not very readable. But there is a small bit of information that can be added to a piece of music, which means we don't need to add all of these number threes over every single triplet, and that we can still present the shuffle pattern in 4/4. And what this looks like on the page is 2 eighth notes equals the first and the last eighth note within a triplet. Now this is very important because it means that anything that is written down that looks like one and should actually be played one and a. So there's two grooves at the bottom of page 81, and both of these are presented in 4/4. The top groove is just a straight eighth note groove, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The second groove is what the groove would look like if we added that small bit of information, which tells us that we're actually dealing with triplets. So it looks the same, but you're actually going to count it 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a. A shuffle. And this little bit of information that's added to the start of the piece applies to the entire piece. So on page 82, we've got exercise 8.3. And you can see at the very beginning of these exercises, we've got that little key added to the top. 2 eighth notes equals the first and the last eighth notes of a triplet. Now these grooves are exactly the same grooves that you played in 8.2, but now they're presented in what appears to be standard eighth notes. But we need to think of this as triplets still, and this actually simplifies how you read this. It's much cleaner. We don't need to include too much information here. It just looks like a normal eighth note groove, but we're thinking in triplets, so anything that looks like an and, we need to think of that as an a. Anything that looks like a number is still a number. So let's try the first example. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Feel familiar? Well, it is. It's exactly the same as the first groove we did in exercise 8.2. Hopefully you're finding this a bit easier to read. Let's see how well you can handle the second groove. You ready? Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
There's 3 more grooves to try there, so give those a go. If you look ahead to page 83, we have that first groove that we just did presented in all 3 different ways. We've got the original 12/8 version, where you can see that middle triplet as a rest. We've then got the first 4/4 version, where we have to add 3s above every single triplet to explain that we're playing triplets within 4/4. And then we have the altered version, which is quite popular in a lot of modern music books, where we've got that little key that says 2 eighth notes equals the first and last eighth note of a triplet, and that's presented in a very clear way. Now I should add that sometimes that key or that little instruction may be written as something like shuffled eighths. That means the same thing. But to make sure you're comfortable reading shuffles in both 12/8 and 4/4, the next song, which is called Rule the Way I Feel, is presented both ways. So on page 84 and 85, we have the 12/8 version, and on page 86 and 87, we have the 4/4 version. Now both versions should sound exactly the same, but you can read these in two different ways. Now personally, I feel like the 4/4 version is much simpler to read, as long as you're aware that you're thinking in triplets still. But you will also find shuffle grooves written in 12/8, so it's important that you're able to read and play both versions. Now, a lot of this piece includes grooves that you've already played, so section A, half of section B, and section D all contain grooves that you've already played within this lesson chapter. Section B, however, uses the ride bell playing quarter notes, and then it's the bass drum pattern that actually has that shuffle element to it. So section A is a shuffled hi-hat, whereas section B is more of a shuffled bass drum. At the end of section B, there's also the opportunity for you to make up your own fill, so we have a half bar fill space there, so 2 slashes, and those represent beats 3 and 4. And once you've completed the triplet roll at the end of section C, we have DS al coda above that bar, and that means we're going to return to the start of section B, where you'll see that Senko symbol, the S with the 2 dots and the line running through the middle. From there, you'll play section B again, right to the end of section B where it says to coda, and you may choose to do a different fill the second time round if you like. And once you've done this, you're going to jump to section D, and that's the last section of the song. In the 4/4 version of the song, one of the main differences is that when you actually have triplet fills, like in bars 4, or in bar 16, or in bar 24, then all of those triplets have the number 3 written over the top. Because even though we've got that bit of information at the start of the song, that little key that tells us that we're dealing with triplets, we still need to have that little 3 over the top of those bits because we are actually hitting the middle triplet. Whereas when we're playing the shuffle pattern, we're not hitting the middle triplet, and that key doesn't really account for that middle triplet. It just says 2 eighth notes equal the first and the last eighth note within an eighth note triplet. So when we have those rolls and those fills, we are playing that middle triplet as well. That's why that number 3 is there. But let's have a listen to the tune and see what it sounds like. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, I hope you like that one. A slightly trickier one, particularly with the ride bell section in section B. Make sure that you try both versions of this. Start with the 12/8 version, because you might find that one a bit more challenging to read, and then try the 4/4 version. By this point, you'll be quite familiar with the song anyway, so some of those patterns might come more naturally. If you don't yet have the book, you can find it on my website, www.ihitdrums.co.uk, and it's available as a paperback or an ebook. You can also subscribe to the website and get a free drum lesson. Now, this is for complete beginners, so if you've never played the drums before and you don't know anything about drums or drum beats, then this free lesson pack will get you started. This pack comes with a video tutorial and a supporting PDF. I think that's plenty for this week, so we'll leave it there. But until next time, enjoy!